Good morning, everybody. I'm Kishore Panikkar, architect and partner, co-founder at a firm called Architecture Red, based out of Chennai. Of course, before all that, thank you, Sanjay. Thank you, Ridhima. It's a wonderful setting. Great to come here, share my thoughts with all of you, and also listen to everybody and see your work. It's quite an interesting platform. My first time here, and thanks. Great job done. Through this presentation, I will touch upon some of the key concerns that engage us as a practice and how we attempt to basically address these through the work that we do. Ours is a practice that works across various scales. We do master planning, we do urban design, we also do apartment buildings and houses. And we believe that the larger issues of a city or a neighborhood strongly influence projects and people at a much smaller scale as well. The world today is more and more an urban world. Population studies show us that across the globe, people are moving from rural areas to urban centers. The more advanced Western countries, seen in the red circles here, already have over 75% of their population living in cities. The number is between 50 and 75% in some countries in South America, Africa, the Far East, and Eastern Europe, while it is under 50% but growing fast in large parts of Asia and Africa. Globally, the trend is clear. As our population continues to grow, the percentage of people living in urban centers across the world has been steadily increasing. As World War II ended, less than 30% of the world's population was living in urban centers. Today, it's almost doubled to 56. Many cities in India, this number will be close to 70% by the time we reach 2050. India is no different. Cities offer a means of escape from poverty for millions of Indians. Daily, thousands of people pour into our cities in search of better opportunities and for a better quality of life. India's growth in urban population as a percentage of its overall population has also mirrored the global trend. From around 17% in 1960, today Indian cities house over 35% of our population. And while India's total population is growing at an annual rate of around 0.9%, our urban population is growing at almost 3 times that rate at 2.4%. Thus, it becomes imperative for us as designers of human habitats and environments to critically look into the quality of the cities of the future. What kind of a quality of life are our cities offering to the citizens of the future? The impact of our cities can be summed up best in the words of Danish architect and urban designer Dan Gell, and I quote, "First we shape our cities and then they shape us," unquote. Here in India, how are we shaping our cities? And how do you think these cities will shape us? In most Indian cities, rapid urbanization has led to expansion of urban boundaries without any proper planning framework. This in turn has resulted in an explosion of banal architecture, poor infrastructure, and above all, a lack of meaningful and accessible green spaces for the public. It's a pretty common sight to see rows and rows of cookie-cutter buildings arranged in neat lines while completely missing out on meaningful open spaces, courtyards, or parks for the people who inhabit these soulless buildings. It is architecture like this that is increasingly taking over our smaller cities and towns, leaving our urban fabric devoid of life, variety, and vibrancy. It is interesting to see in comparison, though, how cities around the world have handled this issue of density. So here we see examples of heavily populated global cities with a comparable dense urban fabric. Let's look at New York, Tokyo, Singapore, and Bombay. And these cities present a very similar character when it comes to density, seen from a very high vantage point. However, once we take a closer look at how neighborhoods in these cities are planned, the results of better planning become more apparent. One can start seeing the clear emphasis on urban green space and their connectivity with building blocks. One metric to understand the real quality of life in a city is to understand the amount of urban green space it offers to each of its residents. It's no surprise that the most vibrant, magnetic, and successful cities are the ones that are able to provide for a decent amount of open space per person to its citizens. New York provides almost 29 square meters of urban green space per person, while even a city as densely populated as Tokyo manages almost 6 square meters per person. Closer home, thanks to mandating green spaces into its city planning guidelines, Singapore offers a generous 66 square meters of urban green space per person. On the other hand, Bombay does abysmally poorly with only 1.24 square meters of green space per capita. The World Health Organization recommends 25 square meters ideally and a minimum of 9 square meters of urban green space per person in cities to ensure a holistic and fulfilling quality of life. Many cities in India are under 5 meters per person, which is way, way below the minimum WHO recommendation itself. So, how do we as architects respond to this challenge? Most of the issues we spoke of so far are related to planning and policy matters. However, the reality is that most architects work with private developers in smaller plots in the city. Also, most cities are already so densely built out that introducing open spaces in any meaningful way, integrated with residential areas and accessible to people, is challenging. So, the question we seek to answer is, as practitioners working within limited sites and with limited mandates, are we just helpless bystanders to the degradation of our cities? Or can we try and make a difference through design? Our studio attempted to answer these questions through our design explorations for Rainforest, a residential apartment project in Trivandrum in Kerala. The client's a local developer. He approached us with a design brief to design a multi-story residential apartment building on almost a 1 acre site within a very dense urban neighborhood in Trivandrum in Kerala. As per a report, the urban green space per person for the city of Trivandrum is approximately 2.2 square meters per person, which is again way below the minimum of 9 square meters that WHO stipulates. And the site and its immediate context does not present any meaningful public urban green space which the residents could walk to. The large swath of green space that you see very close to the site is the governor's house, which is, for obvious reasons, not accessible to the public. The site is located in already a very well-developed residential neighborhood. Adjacent to the site were multi-story apartment buildings, and that meant that the building that we were to design would sit in close proximity to tall buildings, preventing the residents, especially at the lower levels, from having any meaningful engagement with the outside. Trivandrum is a city with undulating terrain, and in our case, the site was lower than the approach road by about 12 meters, which meant that the building would be further lower from the road, making it completely disconnected from the larger context outside. So how could we then reimagine this engagement of the residents with such a site and context? How could the design overcome these constraints so that the residents have a better living experience? So we began by taking advantage of the lower level of the site where we could accommodate 3 levels of parking, taking it out of sight of the day-to-day pedestrian entrance experience from the street level. So this brought the ground plane up to the street level, where we now had a choice to make. Since the entire parking requirement was already accommodated, we could start the apartment units at this level, and that as would be the conventional approach, or we could look at addressing some of the larger challenges of the cities today that we face, as I spoke of earlier, and explore the opportunity to create a green urban space at the level of the street. So we did this by lifting the building off the site and freeing up the ground plane to become a large open green space. Since we had a sizable site, almost an acre, the idea was to look at this as a lushly planted park, accessible from the street level and open on all sides. This would be the heart of the community, where the residents would come together in celebrations and gatherings, and the main entrance lobby would sit in this park, which meant that the space became a part of their everyday living experience of the residents. As we articulated this idea further, the critical choice was made to break down the building into modular units and lift up these in varying heights above the park. This served two purposes. Number one, it helped us to break down the scale of the massive building, making it less imposing and more relatable to the human scale. This created opportunities for the park on the podium to open up much more to the sides and bring in more light and air. Number two, the varying levels at which the units start above the park, it creates a wonderful set of volumes to experience from the park level. This creates elements of surprise and discovery as one meanders through the park within these varying heights and volumes, overlooking the green podium from above. The apartment units thus start only at a much higher level. And what happens is the first 3 to 4 floors overlook the lush park at the lower level. And the park now becomes a context that they respond to rather than neighboring buildings. The floors above start rising above the height of the neighboring buildings and thus start to take in the larger views from outside. To avoid the park being taken over by columns from the floors above, a transfer slab was introduced at the base of each of these towers, which received the columns from the floors above and transferred the loads to 4 corner columns, thus introducing lesser and more dispersed columns in the park area, in some ways evoking the notion of large tree trunks in a forest. Thus, the site is effectively converted into a lush green park and almost an acre in area. Programs like open air theatres, recreational spaces, senior citizens park, pet friendly areas are all planned to be part of this area, this large park, effectively making it the main social space for the community, a place of belonging. These are some views of the park at the design stage. And how does this respond to the larger planning goals that we laid out in the beginning? This 1 acre park translates to over 10 square meters of green space per resident or for the 380 residents of the community. This is a clear 5 times jump over the city average. These are some pictures of the site under construction, and a sense of the scale of the park and the building hovering over it can be gauged from these images. The building is still under construction. Hopefully, we'll be able to share you completed pictures soon. And this is how it is envisaged once complete. And I cannot find a more apt way to conclude this talk than quote this great line by the great Charles Correa. And I quote, "For there is much more to housing than just building houses." Thank you.